For Group Three's problem-solving presentation, I'd like to go over a brief overview of what we're going to cover. Firstly, we have the frames of problem-solving, which is what makes up the overall issue to begin with. Then we have the problem statement. Then we're going to get into the root cause analysis. Then we're going to we're going to go over our generated solutions from the root cause analysis. And then into our decision analyst matrix, which ultimately helps us with our implemented solution. Then we're going to cover some brainstorming techniques that as a group that we used, and then benefits in the group to help us with this problem solving, or how we use brainstorming techniques to help us with our problem solving. So firstly, we have our frames of problem solving, and to give you a brief description of the overall problem itself. So we have Airman Snuffy, who, when he first arrived, he was given his supervisor, Sergeant Salty, who verbally explained what his expectations were as far as how to get a good rating for his EPR and basically how to conduct himself. Now, the three frames that we came up with for this problem is, firstly, we have Airman Snuffy, who is part of the junior enlisted tier. Then we have our NCO, Sergeant Salty, his supervisor. And then finally, our last frame, we have the senior NCO, the flight chief. The problem statement that we ultimately came up with is Airman Snuffy is upset because he did not receive the rating he was expecting. Now, he met all of the verbal expectations, however, did not know about core tasks.
So I am here to discuss the root cause analysis portion of our presentation and the generated solution. To reiterate our problem statement, Airman Snuffy is upset because he did not receive the rating he was expecting, although he met all verbal expectations given to him by Sergeant Salty. The 5 whys concept is what we decided to go with to explain our root cause. We start with asking the question, why does the actual problem exist? The problem exists because of the lack of communication between Sergeant Salty and Airman Snuffy. In our leadership and management lesson, we discussed the importance of the communicating concept, and that is NCOs, in order to master different facets of this: verbal, nonverbal, gestures, facial expressions, written and interpersonal levels of communicating are essential and the responsibility of the leader. Next, why didn't Sergeant Salty provide feedback to Airman Snuffy? Sergeant Salty didn't take care of Airman Snuffy and provide him or her with the tools for success by providing clear written expectations for this airman to have as guidance. Additionally, why didn't Airman Snuffy ask for feedback from Sergeant Salty? So while it's also the member's responsibility to ask for feedback if not given, there are members in the Air Force who, as technical sergeants, have not received feedback from their raters. As an airman, some of them don't know that it's a requirement for their supervisors to provide them with this tool. And finally, the final question of our analysis is, why was there no senior NCO oversight of the ACA process? So if there was no written feedback documented, why did leadership not request a memo from Sergeant Salty stating the reasons for a feedback not being accomplished? So all of these questions come down to the generated solution of there needing to be a better process established for the feedback process. Supervisors should be held accountable for providing initial, midterm, and final ACAs, better known as Airman Comprehensive Assessments. And members should be briefed and reminded that if not given, they are able to ask for these type of feedbacks and for the supervisors to know that it is their responsibility to do so.
So our problem is that Airman Snuffy got marked down on his EPR and he wasn't expecting it. So here we have our decision analysis matrix to help us figure out which potential solution to his problem will ultimately be deemed the best. The factors being evaluated in this decision analysis matrix are the different rank structure, which are going to be your airman, NCO, and senior NCO, and the importance to each type of solution. Now, the solutions being the different feedback types: initial, midterm, and the final, which is also your EPR. These were rated on a scale of 1 to 3, with 1 being the highest, 3 being the lowest. Now, by completing the chart and giving each factor a rating of importance, it tells us that by giving the feedback or ACA, it falls primarily on the NCO or supervisor to actually do. This gives us the best solution to the problem. That solution being that Sergeant Salty needs to do his job and giving Airman Snuffy his feedback so that he actually knows what's expected of him. Now, in order to implement this solution of actually giving the ACA, we have to plan and prepare for it. This can be done by planning or scheduling a date ahead of time that works for both parties, and preparing the form ahead of time so that not only you, but Airman Snuffy in this case, understands the process and actually what's about to be implemented. From there, you actually give the feedback at the said date and time discussed, therefore actually starting the solution. Now, after the solution has been implemented, or the ACA has been given in our case, it's your job to monitor the airman to ensure that not only he knows what he's doing, but that he's doing what you're asking him to do in a beneficial way. If any problems have occurred during the monitoring, they need to be addressed and taken care of as soon as possible. And from there, you will review and analyze the solution, ultimately making sure that it was successful and possibly what adjustments need to be made in order to make it more successful. Now, in the case of Airman Snuffy, the outcome will be a rating that actually reflects the work he was expected to complete based on what was actually discussed in his feedback by the NCO or his supervisor.
Okay, so now we're talking about brainstorming techniques. So for this exercise, we utilize an unstructured approach, meaning that we all just talked. There wasn't any rhyme or reason to it. It was just we threw ideas out there using the quantity over quality method. Essentially, one of them's going to stick, one of them's going to be good, and we found that. So during the initial discussion, we agreed as a collective that communication both up and down the chain is severely lacking, regardless of the AFSC or component being United States Air Force active duty, Air National Guards, and Reserves. It's the same regardless. So most of the group had an experience where there was no written feedback throughout the rating period via ACA feedbacks. And just to clarify, ACA feedbacks are the Airman Comprehensive Assessments. They're done at the beginning of the rating period, in the middle of the rating period, and then the EPR is the final. So you have an idea of whether you're meeting the markers that your supervisor's meeting, and also it's so the supervisor can have an idea of what the airman is wanting. So as seen in the scenario, supervisors will give feedback to the airman. However, some people need this feedback written down so they understand the expectations. Additionally, with communicated failure up the chain, the ACAs provide supervisors with the expectations of the ratee. We had all of these same issues, and for us, this made the most sense to discuss the issue further. So, going back to this first bullet here on the right, the very top one, as in the scenario, just to provide clarification. What this means is supervisors are going to give feedback, right? But not everybody has a steel trap of a memory where they remember everything that they said. It really does help to have that written down objective. You meet this objective, then you will have met standards. If you do better than this objective, then you will have exceeded standards, and ideally, the EPRs will match. So next, we have group benefits to problem solving. So we needed to have a collective understanding of common issues within the Air Force. By utilizing an unstructured approach, we aired out our issues and came to a group understanding. Communication is terrible within the Air Force. Secondly, brainstorming benefited our group by looking over the problem scenario and making sure that the ideas were clear to the audience. The third instance where brainstorming benefited the problem-solving process was when we discussed how we would maintain uniformity between each member to provide a professional and educational lecture. Okay, so just kind of looking back at this. So this very first point here, this is the three ways that the approach that we use, which is unstructured or brainstorming, helped our process of getting this presentation done. So what this really boils down to is we needed to all talk about the most prevalent issue. And myself, Sergeant McCord, Sergeant Mitchell, and Sergeant Clark all agree that communication is terrible within the Air Force. There wasn't any structure to the discussion. We just kind of talked about it. It came about. We brainstormed. We got the good ideas. That's the very first thing. The second was that we all understood the idea, and we needed to go over how to effectively communicate our ideas to the audience, being you. Again, this unstructured brainstorming approach definitely helped because we're getting the information out to you. And we do believe that between 4 NCOs that we figure out how to do a presentation correctly. And just for plain English explanations. So the third instance where brainstorming benefited this discussion process. So we were having a discussion about whether we were going to introduce ourselves, whether we were going to have separate introduction slides for each person, and just to make sure that everything went smoothly, we just wanted to make it look uniform. And we had a discussion between the 4 of us, and we came to that conclusion. So just to overview, or just to review, and to conclude, we discussed frames of problem solving, a problem statement, the root cause analysis, generated solutions, decision and analysis matrix, implemented solutions, brainstorming techniques, and group benefits to problem solving. This does conclude our presentation, and I hope that it has been informative for everybody that's been watching. Have a good week.